When you think of Europe, which cities come to mind? I'm pretty sure most people would think of Paris, London, Barcelona, or Rome. Very few might think of Belgrade, Sofia, Minsk, or Chisinau. However, these cities are also in Europe. This highlights the divide within Europe: Eastern Europe and Western Europe. Western Europe is known for its wealthy and well-developed economies, with a per capita GDP of around $68,000. In contrast, Eastern Europe's per capita GDP is only about $14,000. Similarly, when we map GNI, gross national income, per capita, which indicates average annual income, areas with the lowest income levels appear in red, while areas with the highest income levels are green. It's clear that high-income regions are concentrated in Western Europe, whereas low-income regions are mostly in Eastern Europe. Europe is divided by an invisible economic line. But why is there such a stark difference between Eastern and Western Europe, even though they're part of the same continent? The reasons for this divide lie deeply rooted in Europe's history and geography. In today's video, we'll explore why Eastern Europe became so poor while Western Europe became so wealthy. Despite being the second smallest continent in the world, Europe has been the most powerful in the 20th and 21st centuries. Even today, many major economic powers are located in Europe, giving the continent significant influence over global politics. Looking at the map, Europe is bordered by the Mediterranean, Black Sea, and Caspian Sea to the south, the Arctic Ocean to the north, and the Atlantic Ocean to the west. Ireland and Iceland, situated in the Atlantic, are also part of Europe. Even Greenland is culturally and politically connected to Europe. This raises the question, despite being culturally, religiously, and geographically linked, why is there such a disparity in development between Eastern and Western Europe? To understand the first reason behind this divide, we need to go back 80 years, right after World War II. Communism, or socialism, essentially promoted the idea that a country's resources, businesses, and land should be controlled by the government. Instead of a few people becoming rich, every person in society should receive equal opportunities and returns. Services like healthcare, education, and housing were meant to be equally accessible to everyone. However, the problem with this ideology was that people lacked the freedom to engage in business or innovate. In a communist system, there was no incentive for people to innovate or start businesses, since all profits and returns were controlled by the government. Whatever business you started, its ownership would belong to the government, and the profits would be distributed equally among the people. This raised a question: why would anyone work harder when everyone gets the same share? In contrast, in capitalist societies, people were free to start businesses, earn profits, and only share a portion of their earnings with the government in the form of taxes. Between 1945 and 1991, during the period of communist dominance, Western Europe progressed significantly by building industries based on capitalist ideology. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe lagged far behind. By 1991, with the collapse of communism, the Soviet Union disintegrated, and the European states under Soviet control gained independence. Even after more than 30 years, Eastern Europe remains economically far behind Western Europe. Why? Geography plays a significant role in this disparity. Eastern Europe is geographically situated between two extremes. On one hand, countries like Ukraine, Poland, and Belarus have flat, fertile lands ideal for agriculture. However, these flatlands also made it easy for enemies to invade. Consequently, these regions have historically been conflict zones in Europe. Poland, for instance, is one of the most invaded countries in Europe, targeted by empires ranging from Sweden to the Ottoman Empire and the Soviet Union. Due to the lack of natural barriers like mountains, Eastern European countries were frequently attacked and looted. Despite fertile lands, these invasions prevented them from reaping the full benefits of agricultural production. On the other hand, the Balkan countries in southeastern Europe are mountainous, making construction and infrastructure development extremely challenging. This geographic limitation has rendered them some of the most underdeveloped areas in Eastern Europe. From the perspective of peace and stability, Eastern Europe has been tumultuous. Since 1991, most of the conflicts in Europe have occurred in Eastern Europe. These conflicts have severely affected not only the economies of these countries, but also their emigration rates. For example, during the Yugoslav wars, millions fled the Balkan countries for Western Europe, leading to a severe shortage of skilled workers in the region. Similarly, the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war has caused massive emigration from both countries, further casting doubt on Eastern Europe's future prospect. The factor that makes Europe's geography unfavorable is access to the seas. Western European countries have a significant advantage because they are surrounded by seas. seas. To the northeast lies the Baltic Sea. To the west is the North Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. And to the south is the Mediterranean Sea. This geographical setup gave Western European countries in the 16th century the opportunity to explore trade routes and new continents via these seas. They established colonies, exploited the resources of these colonies, and brought them back to their homelands. This is what the British, Spanish, and French empires did, controlling around 40% of the world's wealth. Sea access was also a key reason why the Ottoman Empire ruled for several centuries. In those times, a country with its own port was considered very powerful. While Western Europe was controlling global trade via the seas, Eastern Europe was largely landlocked and almost cut off from this global trade network. The Eastern European countries that did have access to the sea faced choke points. For example, Poland and its neighbors had to pass through the Danish Straits to reach the Atlantic Ocean. These straits were controlled by Sweden and Germany, who charged fees for passage. Similarly, Southeast European countries needed to pass through the Bosphorus Strait, controlled by the Ottoman Empire, and then cross the Strait of Gibraltar to access the Atlantic, which was controlled at different times by Muslims, the Spanish, or the Ottomans. Thus, Eastern Europe relied heavily on Western Europe for sea trade. Later, Western Europe gained another significant advantage when large reserves of oil and gas were discovered in the North Sea during the 20th century. These reserves turned countries like Norway, Britain, the Netherlands, and Germany into powerhouses of the 21st century. Meanwhile, Eastern Europe was not as fortunate in terms of natural resources. Apart from fertile land, no significant natural resource reserves were discovered in the region. However, Eastern Europe is not entirely deprived. Its agricultural production is so robust that, had communism not arrived, the region might have become the world's food basket. Even after the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the after effects of communism lingered for years. Only a few countries like Poland, the Czech Republic, and Romania developed, mainly because they became members of the European Union. Other Eastern European countries could not join the EU due to specific requirements, one of which is the level of corruption. A map of Europe's top 10 most corrupt states shows that all of them are in Eastern Europe. This doesn't mean that Western Europe is free of corruption, but there it is not beyond the level of national interests. This is why Western Europe still dominates the world, while many youths from the Indian subcontinent dream of moving to Europe, becoming residents there, and securing a better future for their next generations. In summary, geography and communism are the two factors that prevented Eastern Europe from becoming as prosperous as Western Europe. However, they say that everyone gets their time to shine, and what is at the bottom today might be on top tomorrow. A prime example of this transformation is Poland, which was once among Europe's poorest countries, but is now rapidly on its way to becoming the continent's next superpower. Similarly, many Western European economies are moving rapidly toward collapse. A prominent example is Ireland, which has the second highest GDP per capita in Europe after Luxembourg. Despite being one of the richest countries, people are now leaving Ireland. But why is this happening? What is driving people away from one of the world's wealthiest countries? Watch the video to learn more. See you in the next video with another interesting topic. Take care and goodbye.